The moment we stepped into the cavernous exhibition hall, I could feel the familiar surge of excitement. The Los Angeles Auto Show had always been a highlight of the year for me, a chance to witness the latest innovations in automotive engineering, to see firsthand the machines that represented the pinnacle of human achievement in design and speed. The air buzzed with energy, the scent of polished metal and new leather filling my senses as I took it all in. Lisa was beside me, her hand loosely in mine as we navigated the crowds. We had made a tradition of coming here together every year, and I had always thought it was something we both cherished. As we walked, I pointed out the new models, discussing their specs and their performance capabilities. This was my world, my passion, and sharing it with Lisa made it all the more special. The cars were breathtaking, sleek, powerful beasts that seemed almost alive under the spotlights. Each one was a testament to the endless pursuit of perfection, a blend of art and science that made my heart race. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me as we moved from one exhibit to the next, each car more impressive than the last. For as long as I can remember, cars have been more than just machines to me. They were symbols of freedom, of power, of the limitless possibilities that lay just beyond the horizon. As a kid, I used to dream of owning a car that could take me anywhere, that could make me feel invincible. And now, as an adult, that dream had only grown stronger. Being here, surrounded by the very best the automotive world had to offer, was like stepping into a fantasy. But something felt off. As we moved through the show, I noticed that Lisa's enthusiasm wasn't matching mine. She smiled at the right moments and nodded when I pointed out some particularly impressive features, but her eyes were elsewhere. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just tired or distracted. But the more I watched her, the more I realized that her mind was somewhere far away from the gleaming cars and the roaring engines. I tried to draw her back in, showing her a car that I knew she'd love, an elegant, classic model that I had often imagined us driving together. But even then, her interest seemed half-hearted. It was as if the connection we had always shared in this place was fading, slipping through my fingers like sand. And then, as we turned a corner, I saw what had captured her attention. Standing near one of the most stunning cars in the entire show was a man in a perfectly tailored suit, his posture confident, his expression one of easy charm. He was talking to a small group of people, his hands gesturing toward the car beside him, a sleek, jet-black sports car that seemed to shimmer under the lights. My heart skipped a beat as I realized who he was. Jake Patterson is the legendary designer behind some of the most iconic sports cars of the past decade. His name was synonymous with speed, luxury, and cutting-edge design. And from the way Lisa was looking at him, it was clear that she knew exactly who he was too. For a moment, I stood frozen, watching as Lisa's gaze lingered on Jake, her eyes filled with an intensity I hadn't seen in a long time. There was admiration there, yes, but also something more. Something that made my stomach twist with a feeling I didn't want to acknowledge. It wasn't the cars that had drawn her in. It was him. I tried to shake off the unease that was creeping over me, trying to tell myself that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something had changed. The excitement of the show, the joy I usually felt in this place, was suddenly tainted by a sense of dread, a fear that this day, this moment, was the beginning of something I couldn't control. As we continued through the show, I kept one eye on the cars and the other on Lisa, trying to ignore the nagging voice in the back of my mind that whispered of betrayal, of dreams turned to dust. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that our perfect world was about to come crashing down. The moment passed, but the unease it left behind lingered. I tried to re-engage Lisa, pointing out a concept car that had just been unveiled, its futuristic design drawing a crowd. But she seemed distracted, her attention repeatedly drifting back to that jet-black sports car and the man beside it. Jake Patterson. His name buzzed in my mind, mingling with the uncomfortable realization that Lisa's focus had shifted entirely. "Hey, I'm going to check out that convertible over there," she said suddenly, interrupting my thoughts. Her voice was casual, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. She smiled briefly, not meeting my eyes, and before I could respond, she was already walking away, weaving through the crowd with purpose. I watched her go, feeling an odd mixture of confusion and suspicion. Lisa had never been one to stray far during these shows. We always explored together, sharing our impressions and excitement. But now, she was slipping away, drawn to something, or someone, else. I hesitated, my eyes following her as she made her way across the hall. She moved quickly, her steps light and deliberate, like she had a destination in mind. And as I watched her approach the sports car, the knot in my stomach tightened. There was no mistaking where she was headed. Lisa slowed as she neared Jake, her hand brushing against the polished surface of the car. I saw her smile, a different smile, one that was softer, more inviting than the ones she had given me all day. Jake looked up, catching sight of her, and his face lit up with that easy, confident grin I had seen earlier. They exchanged a few words, and I couldn't hear what they were saying over the hum of the crowd, but I didn't need to. The way they stood close to each other, the way Lisa's posture relaxed as if she had found exactly what she was looking for, it was all too clear. She wasn't there for the car. She was there for him. I felt a cold rush of realization, the kind that makes your heart pound in your chest and your mouth go dry. This wasn't just a casual encounter. It was something more, something that had been brewing beneath the surface, unnoticed by me until now. Lisa was captivated by Jake, and I was powerless to stop whatever was happening between them. My first instinct was to march over, to insert myself into their conversation, to remind Lisa that I was still here, still the man she had chosen. But something held me back, pride, maybe, or fear of what I might see up close. Instead, I stood there, frozen. As she leaned in closer to Jake, her laughter ringing out softly above the murmur of voices around them. At that moment, I knew that everything was about to change. The bright lights of the auto show, the gleaming cars, the excitement I had always felt, none of it mattered anymore. My world had shifted, and I was left standing on the edge, watching as Lisa walked further and further away from me, drawn into a new orbit that I had no part in. I watched from a distance as Lisa and Jake began to talk. Their heads inclined toward each other in a way that felt far too intimate for a conversation about cars. Jake's presence was magnetic, and I could see how easily he drew her in. He was everything the show embodied, powerful, stylish, and undeniably appealing. Jake gestured toward the car beside them, a sleek, aerodynamic beast that looked as though it could tear through the streets with effortless speed. Even from where I stood, I could hear the smooth cadence of his voice, explaining the finer points of the vehicle's design. Its cutting-edge technology and the pure thrill of driving something so meticulously crafted. Every word was like a carefully placed hook, drawing Lisa closer, and making her forget everything else. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides, a sharp pang of jealousy cutting through me. It wasn't just about the car. It was about the way he looked at her, the way she responded to him, her eyes wide with admiration. She hung on his every word, her expression one of rapt attention as if nothing else in the world mattered but this moment with him. Jake moved his hand along the car's hood, his fingers brushing the smooth surface with a reverence that matched his words. "This," he said, his voice low and enticing, "is more than just a machine. It's freedom, speed, and power, all at your fingertips. Imagine what it would feel like to take control of something this extraordinary." Lisa smiled, a soft, almost shy smile that sent a jolt of unease through me. "It's incredible," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always dreamed of driving something like this." Jake's eyes flickered with interest, his smile deepening. "You've got good taste. Not everyone can appreciate what a car like this represents. It's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about the experience, the thrill of the ride. It's about making a statement." Lisa nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "I can see that. It's beautiful." "Beautiful," Jake echoed, but he wasn't looking at the car anymore. His eyes were fixed on Lisa, his gaze lingering just a little too long. A car like this deserves to be driven by someone who understands it, who can appreciate every detail, every nuance. She blushed slightly, and I could see the effect his words were having on her. This wasn't just a casual chat about cars. It was something more, something that was growing between them with every passing second. The light touch of flirtation, the subtle exchange of glances. It was all there, right in front of me, and I was helpless to stop it. Jake leaned in a little closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "You know, I don't let just anyone drive my cars. But I think you'd be perfect behind the wheel of this one." Lisa's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," he said with a grin that was both charming and dangerous. "Why don't you come by my garage sometime? I'll let you take it for a spin. See how it feels to own the road." I felt a wave of nausea roll through me as I watched Lisa's reaction. She was flattered, her eyes sparkling with excitement. The idea of driving that car, of having that kind of power and freedom, was something that resonated with her, maybe even more than I had ever realized. I wanted to march over there, to pull her away from him, to remind her that I was still here, that this was supposed to be our day, our experience. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my feet glued to the floor as I watched them, powerless to do anything but witness the unfolding of something I had never expected. The flirting was subtle, wrapped in the language of cars and design, but it was there. And it was tearing me apart. Lisa and Jake continued to talk, their conversation flowing easily, their connection growing stronger with each word. And as I stood there, the reality of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just about a car, or even about the thrill of the show. It was about something much deeper, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. And in that moment, I knew that my life was about to take a turn I could never have anticipated. As I stood there, watching the easy rapport between Lisa and Jake, a cold dread began to settle in my chest. It was the kind of feeling that gnaws at you, refusing to let go until you confront it head on. Something was wrong. The way they stood so close, the way Lisa's eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. It all felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I tried to shake off the suspicion gnawing at the edges of my mind. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe it was just the thrill of the show, the allure of the cars, and Jake's undeniable charisma. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just about a car, or even about the admiration of a famous designer. There was something more, something unspoken, lurking beneath the surface of their conversation. Lisa laughed at something Jake said, a soft, genuine laugh that cut through the noise of the crowd. It was a sound I had always loved, but hearing it now, directed at someone else. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't just stand by and let this happen. I needed to know what was going on. Making sure to keep my distance, I started to follow them, weaving through the throngs of people as discreetly as I could. They were moving slowly, still engrossed in their conversation, their heads bent together as they walked. Every so often, Jake would point out a feature on one of the cars they passed, and Lisa would listen intently, nodding along, her eyes never leaving his. I kept a few paces behind, close enough to hear snippets of their conversation but far enough away that they wouldn't notice me. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through my veins. I felt like a detective in one of those old noir films, tailing a suspect through the city streets, waiting for the moment when everything would fall into place. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and the stakes were painfully real. As they moved further away from the main exhibits, the crowds began to thin out. They were heading toward a more secluded area of the show, where the most exclusive cars were displayed, models not yet released to the public, reserved only for the elite few who could afford such luxuries. It was quieter here, the hum of the crowd fading into the background, leaving only the soft murmur of their voices and the occasional click of a camera. Jake stopped in front of a sleek, silver sports car, its curves catching the light in a way that made it look almost otherworldly. Lisa gasped softly, her hand instinctively reaching out to touch the car's smooth surface. Jake watched her, his eyes dark and unreadable, as if he were waiting for something. "This is the one I was telling you about," Jake said, his voice low, almost intimate. "It's not even on the market yet. But for someone like you, I might be able to make an exception." Lisa turned to him, her expression a mixture of surprise and delight. "You would do that? For you?" "Absolutely." His smile was slow, deliberate, like he was savoring the moment. "I can see you behind the wheel of this car, feeling the power, the speed. It's like nothing you've ever experienced." I felt a sharp pang of jealousy, my hands curling into fists at my sides. He wasn't just talking about the car. The way he looked at her, the way his voice dropped when he spoke, there was something unmistakably intimate in his tone, something that made my blood run cold. Lisa seemed to hesitate, glancing around as if she suddenly remembered where she was. For a moment, I thought she might pull away, that she would remember who she was, who we were. But then, she smiled, a soft, almost shy smile, and nodded. "I'd love that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's grin widened, and he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, sleek key fob. He held it out to her, the gesture casual, almost offhanded, but I could see the significance of it in the way Lisa's eyes widened in surprise. "Take it," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "Consider it a preview of what's to come." I couldn't watch it anymore. The reality of what was happening hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt a wave of nausea rise. There was no more denying it. This was more than just a casual flirtation. Something had shifted between them, something that was taking them down a path I wasn't sure we could come back from. But I needed to be sure. I needed to know just how far this had gone, and what it would mean for us. For me, as they continued their conversation, I made a decision. I would follow them, no matter where they went, no matter what they did. I had to know the truth, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the woman I thought I loved. So I kept my distance, my eyes locked on them as they moved deeper into the shadows of the showroom, my heart pounding with every step. There was no turning back now. After the show, things began to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. Lisa seemed different, more distant, yet somehow more alive. It was as if that encounter with Jake had ignited something in her, something that had been dormant for far too long. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was just the excitement of the show lingering, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Lisa started spending more time out of the house, always with some excuse about errands or meeting friends. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then the phone calls began, quiet, whispered conversations that would end abruptly when I walked into the room. She would tell me they were nothing, just friends catching up or harmless chit-chat, but the way her eyes darted away, the way she clutched her phone a little too tightly, told me otherwise. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were impossible to ignore. Lisa was slipping away, and Jake was the one pulling her. The worst part was, I didn't know how to stop it. I could feel her drifting further and further away, caught in the allure of something, or someone, I couldn't compete with. And I knew that the longer this went on, the more inevitable the outcome would be. It didn't take long for Lisa and Jake's conversations to spill beyond the auto show. They began meeting regularly, their rendezvous becoming more frequent and more secretive. It was always under the guise of something innocent, a coffee here, a lunch there, but I knew better. I could see the change in her, the way she glowed when she mentioned him, the way she'd light up at the mere thought of seeing him again. Jake had become the center of her world, and I was just a shadow in the background. Their relationship grew quickly, fueled by a shared passion for speed, luxury, and the thrill of the forbidden. Jake represented everything Lisa had always dreamed of: fast cars, glamorous parties, and a life far removed from the mundane routines we had settled into. He was the embodiment of her fantasies, and she was falling deeper into his world with every passing day. I watched helplessly as Lisa became more and more entangled in Jake's web. She was intoxicated by his charm, his wealth, and the promise of a life she had always desired but never thought she could have. And Jake, ever the smooth talker, knew exactly how to play to her desires. One evening, after another of their clandestine meetings, Lisa came home with a look of pure exhilaration on her face. She was practically glowing, her eyes bright with excitement. I could see it in the way she moved, the way she spoke. Something had changed between them, something significant. I didn't have to wait long to find out what it was. Later that night, when she thought I was asleep, I overheard her on the phone with Jake. Their voices were low and intimate, but I could still make out the words that would seal my fate. "Jake, you can't be serious," Lisa said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "Why not?" Jake's tone was smooth and confident. "You deserve it, Lisa. You deserve everything you've ever wanted. And I can give it to you. But, your car? Are you offering me the keys?" Jake chuckled softly. "I'm offering you more than just a car, Lisa. I'm offering you a taste of the life you've always dreamed of. The speed, the luxury, the freedom. It's all yours if you want it. All you have to do is take the next step." There was a pause, and I could almost hear Lisa's heart racing through the silence. "And if I do, what then?" "Then it's yours," Jake replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "All of it. The car, the life, everything you've ever wanted. Just keep seeing me. Keep this going, and I promise you, Lisa, you'll never want for anything again." Her response was lost in a breathless murmur, but I didn't need to hear the words to know what she would say. The temptation was too great, the offer too enticing. Jake was offering her everything she had ever wanted, and she was powerless to resist. As I lay there, my heart pounding in my chest, I knew I had lost her. Lisa had already made her choice. The keys to Jake's car were more than just a symbol, they were a promise. A future that didn't include me. She was slipping through my fingers, drawn into a world of speed and luxury that I could never hope to compete with. And all I could do was watch as the woman I loved drifted further and further away, chasing a dream that was destined to tear us apart. It was a quiet evening when it happened. I had stayed late at work, trying to drown out my worries with the steady hum of office lights and the rhythmic tapping of my keyboard. When I finally returned home, Lisa was already asleep, her side of the bed neatly made, her breathing even and peaceful. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling that had been building up all day, telling myself it was just paranoia or stress from work. As I passed by the living room, I noticed her phone lying on the coffee table, face up. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but tonight was different. There was something about the way it was positioned, as if it was waiting for someone to pick it up. My curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen and saw a message notification from one of Lisa's friends. Her name was Emma, and she had always been friendly, if a little too inquisitive at times. I hesitated, then picked up the phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I unlocked it. I didn't intend to invade her privacy, but something compelled me to look, to understand what was happening. The message thread was open, and as I scrolled through the conversation, my heart sank with each passing line. What I read was a painful confirmation of everything I had feared. "Lisa, I can't believe you're doing this," Emma's message read. "Are you sure about him? The whole thing seems so fast." "I know," Lisa replied, her words full of excitement and nervousness. "But you don't understand. Jake is everything I've ever wanted. He's offering me a chance to live the life I've always dreamed of. The car, the luxury, it's like a fairy tale come true." Emma's response was more cautious. "But what about Steven? How do you think he'll react when he finds out?" Lisa's reply was blunt and revealing. "Steven doesn't understand me. He's comfortable and safe, but he doesn't get what I want. Jake's offering me a way out, a chance to have everything I've ever dreamed of. I can't pass it up." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I continued reading. Lisa's words were a brutal revelation, laying bare her true feelings. She wasn't just enchanted by Jake's charm or the allure of a luxury car. She was in love with the idea of escaping her current life, of living in a world of glamour and excitement that Jake represented. Her next message was even more shocking. "Jake said that if things go well, he'll give me the keys to his car. Can you imagine? I'll be living the dream, Emma. And Steven will be left behind, stuck in his boring routine. I'm finally getting what I deserve." I put the phone down, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The realization of Lisa's betrayal hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the breath out of me. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was driven by a fantasy. An illusion of a life that Jake had promised her, a life she thought was worth sacrificing everything for. The pain of it was almost unbearable. The thought that Lisa had been planning this, that she had made a conscious choice to leave me for the sake of a car and a glamorous lifestyle. It was a wound that cut deep, leaving me reeling. I stared at the phone, the screen reflecting my stunned expression, and I felt a hollow emptiness settle in my chest. Everything I had believed in, everything I had worked for, had been torn apart in an instant. The life I thought we were building together had been a facade, a mere backdrop for Lisa's fantasy. With a heavy heart, I placed the phone back on the coffee table and sat down on the couch, my mind racing. I needed to confront her, to face this betrayal head-on, but I wasn't sure how. The shock of discovering the truth was overwhelming, and the thought of having to face Lisa, to ask her about this, was almost too much to bear. I sat there in the darkness, trying to process everything, trying to find a way forward. The road ahead was unclear, and the pain was fresh, but one thing was certain, the life I had known was over. Lisa had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The days following the revelation were a blur of pain and anger. Every time I looked at Lisa, I saw not the woman I loved, but the stranger who had betrayed me for the allure of a shiny new car and the fantasy of a glamorous life. It was as though the fabric of our life together had unraveled, revealing a reality I was unwilling to accept. I spent days in a daze, trying to come to terms with the betrayal, but it was impossible to ignore the gnawing need for retribution. Lisa had made her choice, and while it hurt more than I could say, I felt a burning desire to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. It wasn't just about her affair, it was about the arrogance and the deception, the way she had treated our life together as if it were disposable. The turning point came one night when I couldn't sleep. haunted by the image of Lisa's excited face as she talked about Jake's car. It was then that I made up my mind. I would use that car, the one Jake had promised her, as a tool of my revenge. If that was the symbol of her betrayal, then it would become the instrument of her comeuppance. I set out to make my plan a reality. The next morning, I began researching the car Jake had promised Lisa. It was a high-end, limited edition sports car, something that represented the pinnacle of luxury and speed. It wasn't just any car, it was a symbol of everything Lisa had yearned for, and I intended to make it the centerpiece of my revenge. The purchase of the car was a meticulous process. I wanted everything to be perfect, to execute my plan with precision. It wasn't just about buying the vehicle, it was about crafting a moment that would deliver the impact I intended. I knew that if I wanted Lisa to truly understand the depth of her betrayal, I needed to make the situation unforgettable. I made arrangements with the dealership to keep the transaction discreet. The car, a stunning, limited edition sports model, was a dream come true for Lisa. Its sleek design, powerful engine, and luxurious features were everything she had ever desired. I made sure the car was delivered to my house, to a location that Lisa wouldn't suspect. The first step of my revenge was to let Lisa find out about the car. I wanted her to believe that Jake had fulfilled his promise, that he had given her the car she so eagerly desired. The thought of her excitement turning into confusion and realization was almost poetic. I planned a casual evening at home, making sure Lisa and I would be alone. I wanted her to see the car on her terms, without any interference or distractions. As the day of the reveal approached, I could barely contain my anticipation. I had placed the car in the garage, covered it with a large sheet to add an element of surprise, and prepared a carefully worded note to accompany the car. When Lisa came home that evening, she was in high spirits, still buoyed by the thrill of her recent interactions with Jake. I could see the spark in her eyes, the eagerness in her step. I had to force myself to remain calm, to act as if everything was normal, even though my heart was racing. We had dinner, engaged in light conversation, and then I casually mentioned that I had a surprise for her. Lisa's eyes lit up, and she eagerly followed me to the garage, her excitement palpable. I pretended to be nonchalant as I led her to the covered car. "Close your eyes," I instructed, trying to hide my grin. I want it to be a surprise. Lisa giggled, her anticipation growing. I carefully pulled the sheet away, revealing the gleaming car beneath. Her gasp of astonishment was exactly what I had hoped for. She stood there, frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief as she took in the sight of the vehicle she had dreamed of for so long. "Oh my God, Stephen!" she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of shock and delight. "Is this really for me?" I watched as she reached out tentatively, her fingers grazing the smooth surface of the car. She was about to say something when her gaze fell on the note I had left on the dashboard. It was written in elegant script, designed to look like something Jake might have sent. "Lisa, I hope this brings you the joy you've always dreamed of. Jake." Lisa's smile faltered as she read the note, her expression shifting from excitement to confusion. I could see the moment when realization dawned on her. She looked at the car, then at me, her eyes narrowing as she tried to process the situation. "It's not what you think," I said, my voice steady, though I could feel the tension in my shoulders. "I know you must be surprised, but this is for you." Lisa's face turned pale as she looked at me, then back at the car. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and I could see the struggle in her eyes as she tried to reconcile the car's presence with the truth she had been avoiding. This isn't from Jake, is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly. "No, Lisa. This is from me. I wanted you to have it, to see it, and to understand why I'm doing this." The realization hit her hard, and I could see the pain and embarrassment flashing across her face. She had been expecting to see Jake's grand gesture, not the cold truth of my revenge. Her dream car, which she had believed was a gift from Jake, was now a stark reminder of her betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned away from me, the reality of her situation sinking in. She had been so wrapped up in the fantasy of a luxurious life that she hadn't seen the consequences of her actions. Now, the car, a symbol of everything she had desired, was in the hands of the man she had wronged. I watched her with a mixture of sadness and resolve. The first stage of my plan was complete. Lisa had seen the car, and she had understood that it was not a gift from Jake, but a tool of retribution. The message was clear, and the impact was undeniable. The car was more than just an object. It was a statement, a declaration of the price she had paid for her choices. As Lisa stood there, grappling with the consequences of her actions, I knew that this was only the beginning. There was more to come, more to reveal. But for now, I took solace in the fact that she had received the message loud and clear. The path to retribution had begun, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The silence in the garage was heavy, laden with unspoken words and raw emotion. Lisa stood by the car, her face flushed with anger and disbelief, as I watched her from a distance. The gleam of the sports car, once a symbol of her dreams, now stood as a stark reminder of the betrayal that had torn our lives apart. "You think this is some kind of joke?" Lisa's voice was sharp, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can just buy me a car and everything will be okay?" I met her gaze, my expression calm and detached. I had anticipated this confrontation, prepared for her anger and accusations. "This isn't a joke, Lisa. It's a statement." Her eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "A statement? What the hell are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, my mind clear despite the emotional storm raging within me. "I bought the car to show you that dreams built on lies can quickly turn into nightmares. You've been living in a fantasy, thinking that Jake's promises and the allure of luxury would give you everything you ever wanted. But the reality is much harsher." Lisa's face went from red with anger to pale with shock. She was struggling to process my words, the weight of my message settling in. "You think you can just use this card to make me feel guilty? To punish me?" "It's not about punishment," I said, my voice steady and cold. "It's about showing you the truth. You've been blinded by the glamour of Jake's world, chasing a dream that wasn't real. This car is a symbol of that illusion, and I wanted you to see it for what it truly is." She shook her head, her anger giving way to frustration. "You don't understand, Stephen. Jake gave me hope. He offered me a chance to escape, to live the life I've always wanted. And now you're using this card to rub my face in it?" "It's not about hope," I replied, my tone unwavering. "It's about reality. You thought you could leave everything behind for a promise of something better, something faster, something more glamorous. But that promise was built on deceit. And now, here you are, facing the consequences." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but her anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. "You think this is fair? You think this is going to fix anything?" "I don't expect it to fix anything," I said, my voice softer now but still firm. "I expect you to see the truth. The car is just a physical representation of the lie you bought into. It's a wake-up call, Lisa. A chance for you to face the reality of your choices." She turned away from me, her shoulders shaking as she tried to compose herself. The anger and frustration were evident, but there was also a sense of defeat. The car, once a dream, had become a painful reminder of her betrayal and the fantasy she had chased. As she stood there, grappling with her emotions, I realized that this confrontation was not just about the car or the betrayal. It was about coming to terms with the harsh truths of life and the choices we make. Lisa had been living in a world of illusions, and now she was forced to confront the reality that had been hidden behind the veneer of luxury and excitement. "I hope this helps you understand," I said quietly, watching her struggle. "I hope it makes you think about what matters and what you've lost." Lisa didn't respond, her silence speaks volumes. The confrontation had been intense and emotional, but it was clear that the impact of my message had been made. The car, once a symbol of her dreams, had become the centerpiece of her realization, a harsh reminder of the price she had paid for chasing a fantasy. As I left the garage, leaving Lisa to her thoughts, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. The confrontation had been necessary, a step toward closing this chapter of our lives. It was a painful process, but it was also a necessary one. The path to retribution had been set, and now it was up to Lisa to come to terms with the reality she had created. The final piece of my plan was set into motion as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. The car, now a symbol of shattered dreams and broken promises, was ready to make its final journey. I had arranged for it to be delivered to Jake's garage, a place where Lisa and Jake had shared their secret moments and built their illusions. I drove the car myself, taking a route that would avoid any unnecessary attention. The sleek, silver sports car glided smoothly over the pavement, its powerful engine a stark contrast to the heavy thoughts that weighed on my mind. As I approached Jake's garage, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over me. The car would be the final act in this twisted drama of betrayal and retribution. The garage was dimly lit, and as I pulled the car inside, I could feel the gravity of the moment. I parked it in the center of the space, ensuring that it would be the first thing Jake and Lisa saw when they arrived. I took a deep breath and placed the note on the windshield, carefully positioning it so it was visible. The note was simple but loaded with meaning. It read, "Return to reality. Steven." With the note in place, I left the garage and made my way back to my car, my heart heavy with a mix of resolve and sadness. I had done what I set out to do, but the weight of it all was almost unbearable. The final act was complete, and now it was time for Lisa and Jake to confront the reality of their actions. As I drove away, I could only imagine the scene that would unfold when Lisa and Jake discovered the car. The garage would become the stage for the final confrontation, the place where their dreams would be shattered, and their plans undone. I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, I received a call from a mutual friend who had witnessed the scene. Lisa and Jake had arrived at the garage together, expecting to find the car as a symbol of their success and their future. Instead, they found it marked with my note, a stark reminder of the truth they had tried to escape. Lisa's reaction was described to me in painful detail. When she saw the car, her excitement quickly turned to confusion and then to horror as she read the note. The reality of her situation hit her with a force she hadn't anticipated. She had lost not only the car she had dreamed of but also the trust and love of the man who had once been her partner. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the magnitude of her loss. She had sacrificed everything for a fleeting fantasy, only to find herself alone and broken. The car, which had once represented her dreams, was now a painful symbol of her downfall. Jake's reaction was equally devastating. He was furious and bewildered, his plans and ambitions crumbling before his eyes. The garage, which had been a place of hope and excitement, became a scene of shattered dreams and bitter reality. The realization that Lisa had lost everything, her dream car, her relationship with Jake, and the trust of her former husband, was a blow that left both of them reeling. As the story unfolded, it was clear that the final act of retribution had achieved its intended effect. Lisa was left to confront the reality of her choices, the shattered pieces of her dreams lying around her. The car, now a symbol of her betrayal, was a stark reminder of the cost of her actions. The pain and regret that followed were palpable. Lisa's dreams had been built on lies, and now she faced the harsh truth of her situation. The life she had chased had turned into a nightmare, leaving her disillusioned and alone. I watched from a distance, feeling a mix of sorrow and satisfaction. The final act had been necessary, a way to bring closure to the chaos that had erupted from Lisa's betrayal. The road to retribution had been painful, but it was a path that had to be traveled. As I drove away from the scene, I knew that the story was coming to a close. The car had served its purpose, and the consequences of Lisa's actions were laid bare. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought a resolution to the turmoil that had consumed our lives. And with that, I turned my attention to rebuilding my path, leaving behind the remnants of a painful chapter. The silence of the night wrapped around me like a familiar but unwelcome cloak. The turmoil of the past weeks seemed to settle into a strange, heavy calm. The garage where the final act of retribution had taken place was now a distant memory, replaced by the stillness of my own home. The echoes of Lisa's shocked cries and Jake's bewildered anger had faded, leaving behind a profound sense of finality. As I looked out of the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The satisfaction of seeing the car, the symbol of shattered dreams and broken promises, delivered to Jake's garage, had been undeniable. It was a statement, a declaration of the truth that Lisa and Jake had tried so hard to avoid. But while that act of revenge had provided a momentary sense of justice, it had also opened my eyes to a deeper truth. The satisfaction from exacting revenge had been fleeting. The car, with its glaring message of return to reality, had done its job, but it had also illuminated a fundamental reality for me. Holding onto the pain and bitterness, even when justified, was a barrier to my peace and growth. The retribution I sought had been a necessary part of the process, but it was not the end of the journey, it was merely a chapter in it. I had been so consumed by the need to correct the wrongs done to me that I hadn't fully realized how much of my own life had been caught in the crossfire. The anger and hurt that fueled my actions had been important in their own right, but they were not a foundation on which to build a future. The time had come to let go of the past and embrace a new beginning. In the days following the confrontation, I started to take concrete steps toward moving forward. I began to sort through the remnants of my life with Lisa, packing away old memories and making space for new ones. The physical act of clearing out our shared space was symbolic of the emotional work I needed to do. It was a way of separating myself from the past, of making a clean break from the pain and betrayal that had once defined my existence. I reached out to friends and family, reconnecting with those who had supported me through the storm. Their presence provided comfort and a reminder that I was not alone in this journey. I also took time for self-reflection, seeking to understand what I truly wanted from life moving forward. The process of self-discovery was both challenging and liberating, as I came to terms with the lessons learned and the growth that had emerged from the pain. With each passing day, I felt a growing sense of clarity and purpose. The future, once clouded by the shadows of betrayal, began to open up with possibilities. I made plans to explore new interests and passions, to find joy in the things that had once been overshadowed by the turmoil. It was a chance to rediscover who I was, independent of the past that had weighed me down. The final act of retribution had served its purpose, but it was time to move beyond it. The past, with all its hurt and deception, was behind me. I embraced the opportunity to build a new life, one defined by honesty, integrity, and self-respect. The lessons of the past were important, but they were not the sole focus of my future. As I stood on the threshold of this new chapter, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine to navigate. The weight of betrayal had lifted, replaced by the promise of a fresh start. I was ready to face whatever came next with an open heart and a renewed sense of hope. In the end, the journey of retribution had been a difficult one, but it had led me to a place of understanding and acceptance. The past had its place, but it no longer dictated my path. The future was a blank canvas, and I was ready to paint it with the colors of a new beginning. The story had come full circle, and as I looked forward, I felt a quiet confidence that the best was yet to come.